Welcome to Pressplay, Amit.
Hi, Vineet. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for jumping on to our 9th podcast. Excited to announce that this is the first e-learning focused one. And keeping in mind that video is an integral part of any e-learning business, we have an industry and startup veteran, Amitt Agrawwal, as our guest. Amit ran YouTube and Google in India for many years and has seen the evolution of video right in front of his eyes. Disclaimer before we jump in, I'm an investor in his startup OckyPocky, and let's get right into it. Over to you, Amit, first to introduce yourself and your e-learning startup OckyPocky.
Hi, Vineet. So some of you would know already, and now Vineet has told you that I'm the guy who's also credited to building the early stage YouTube ecosystem in India. So yes, I was indeed the first person on ground, saw the journey from zero to about $100 million of annual revenue. I also did a bunch of other roles across APAC. For example, YouTube educational content. Vertical was incubated by me, similar for sports and things like that. Then before that, I'm an IIM Bangalore alumni. Before that, St. Stephen's College. Otherwise, I come from Lucknow. I don't know if any of you listening to this have been to Lucknow, but it's a very, very charming city known for its language, culture, food, clothing, various things. And talking about OckyPocky, so even when I was at YouTube, because of the kind of background I come from, wherein me and my siblings, we are first generation college graduates. My mom never got a chance to go to school. My dad had to drop out after primary years because of financial reasons. They brought us up well, and I go back to those tier 3, 4 towns because I still do have some relatives, cousins in those parts. And I see the value of education even today. What hasn't changed since my childhood to now is that education is not a service that the middle class parent buys. It is the service that they buy because their hope is that it changes the game. And I saw a huge gap about employability of the Indian graduates that were coming out of the system. So India produces millions of graduates every year, and arguably 95% of them, they really struggle to find their first jobs, their first set of promotions after the job starts and things like that. And when you talk to talent managers across, it boils down to the first level skill, which is how are they communicating, what are their soft skills around communication. And the foundation of that is in English language learning. So we thought we'd do something about it, see whether we can scientifically fix it up. And that's how the OckyPocky dream started, to equip 95% of India that's sort of getting left behind on employability opportunities because something as simple as language learning.
Awesome. Wow, that's quite a story, both personal and professional, as well as the OckyPocky one. And referring to OckyPocky and digging a little deeper, how has e-learning business evolved for OckyPocky over the past 12 months during the pandemic? And which milestones are you most proud of?
Sure. So we are sort of pioneers in the early childhood space in India, which is defined as kids below 6 years for most measures, but I say below 8 years for India, given the quality of education outside the top 5-10% schools. The second product or service that we've had is a very intelligent, commonsensical, scientific, human-assisted language learning approach, which sort of covers early childhood as well as the primary school students. EdTech has really evolved phenomenally during COVID times, which is what last 12 months is. Any technology requires a certain point in time before numbers begin to happen, before the hockey stick effect takes off, and that was forcibly provided by COVID in the wave 1, and even more so in wave 2. So what that allowed us to do was to challenge ourselves with our limitations and see whether we can go forward. Um, Also, a couple of things that I'm really proud of is, we built. Um, so not only that we are market leaders in early childhood space because we started as a pioneer, the number two player in the space would probably be less than half of where we are at. Um, but also that in edtech, if you don't make the learning experience good enough, there is no real boundary for somebody to close a browser tab or switch off your app, launch another one. So the real secret of success is, can you build something that people come back to? We measure that as a D30 retention process. And what's an industry benchmark is, let's say on day 30, if you're retaining even 10% of your users. I mean, a lot of consumer apps in general retain less than 10% on day one. I'm saying even on day 30, if you're retaining more than 10, you should be happy with what you built. In our case, we are more than 3 times of that. Even on day 180, which is like 6 months down the road since somebody installed, we are way more than 10%. So so that's something that I'm very proud of, that we've been able to build. Also, last 12 months also allowed us to build some revenue experiments and improve the revenue model, because earlier we were completely free solution, did not have a paid product tagged onto it. So that's evolved really, really well. And that's another thing that wouldn't have been easy, except for the fact that we built a very solid product. There was a timing provided by COVID led accelerated adoption, and that's what helped us do it. So very happy with what we've been able to build.
Amazing. Congratulations on those milestones, Amit, especially the D30 story will resonate among startup founders. So, what was the genesis for the OckyPocky idea, and especially the mascot? I'm a big fan of the mascot. I'm sure that resonates very well with the kids.
Sure. Yes, it's insanely popular with a lot of children. So when you're designing for early childhood audience, kids in general at an early age are very enamored by the characters that they watch and play with all the time. So if you went to any
Right.
typical pre-COVID play out area, right, you would find 80% of the kids will be wearing a t-shirt which has some character on it, whether it's Dora, whether it's Mickey Mouse, it doesn't matter. I mean, that just shows the fascination of this demographic, because they really love it. So we thought, if you have to gamify the whole learning experience before gamification happens, how do we make the product relatable? So that's when we started designing this character, and we actually researched a lot before reaching OckyPocky the octopus. And I'm personally not a very big fan of octopus, because traditionally it's been the lion or the elephant. So we did have those two as well. But what surprised us was that OckyPocky sort of rolls off your tongue as a toddler much easier, right?
Right.
Because it sort of rhymes,
Mm.
and that's why the name got a very quick acceptance. Now there's no way I can transplant the name OckyPocky on an elephant or a lion or any other animal. So we just stuck with the octopus,
Nice.
and we started building that out. So that's when we invested in a whole anthem. So if some of you who've downloaded my Android app, um, the one that I was boasting about briefly, that how we've got amazing retention and growth. By the way, we've also tripled our numbers in the last 12 months. That goes without saying. But we
Mm.
built a song, an anthem which goes like, "My best friend's OckyPocky, ooh, OckyPocky." And I was so surprised when kids started sending through their parents, obviously, their videos, their dance routines along this anthem. And so we keep building it out. We make it very playful, very engaging, and it shows up on each and every screen on my app. So that's the story briefly about how OckyPocky started. Some of the research stories.
Wow, amazing, amazing. And we always on the wildlife side of things, we always hear about, octopuses being this enigma, and there's so much research being done about their intelligence. So, that's
Yes.
that angle as well. So, brilliant.
Yeah, there was a huge intellectual angle that overlapped with this. They've got multiple brains, very, very flexible, agile on environments and things like that. So, I mean, if I keep going around that, we'll discuss that for the next 15 minutes, just the mascot.
Awesome, man. That's really smart. Uh, so tell us a little about your video streaming strategy, and what are the plans there?
Sure. I think from day one, we wanted to build something that is very easy for us with very lean resources to consume, in terms of maintenance. So I've been a very big fan of cloud adoption. And we were earlier on, various platforms. We've used Sprout to launch our solution. We've rolled away from that. It was great to launch with in the e-learning space. It is built on top of Amazon Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to Google Cloud because we partnered with GCP at that point in time, using some of their speech APIs as well as other cloud hosting components. But more recently, we've been using Azure framework.
Mm-hmm.
We don't use any of the newly emerging sort of platforms yet, but my guess is, stage is coming where we'll do it better. I care a lot about latency and user experience, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I care a lot about the data that flows back. So any cloud provider that's able to provide me with a lot of insights about my users' usage patterns, things like that, blocks, besides just smoothing out the experience. So those two things I really care about in that order. So first preference is obviously user experience,
Mm-hmm.
but equally, but slightly less important preference is what data flows back to me. Given the scale of growth that's happening, I think as a startup, hardly anybody is building out their own server side infrastructure at the early stage. It comes much, much later.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard of stories where, very mature stage companies who are like unicorns and decacorns in the valley,
Mm-hmm.
they've stopped building their own backend. They're all cloud is the way to go.
That's true. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks for that. Um, and just talking about the startup life and the challenges. So the last 12 to 15 months, obviously the e-learning businesses have grown significantly. But along with that, what are some of the challenges that you would like to talk about? Um, and also, I'm sure you're preparing for the life once the new normal hits, or we get back to some level of normalcy. How would you adapt, and how would the business change?
Sure. I think that's a broader question, but I'll sort of restrict this to the edtech sort of a space, if
Yeah,
that's okay with you.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think in general, what happened was you turned the tap completely open. So all the early adopters who wanted to embrace technology when, the timing was that there was a lockdown, the schools were shut. In our case, schools are completely shut. Um, Most of them have gone out of business. Some of them are surviving. At least the big ones are surviving on, providing online solutions. And in some sense, temporarily, they're competing with edtech giants. But of course, their focus remains on an offline service play once things go back to normal. Yeah. So what that did
Mm-hmm.
was the entire early adopters, they started trying out things.
Mm-hmm.
Now they ran into bad products. There's a lot of them out there. They ran into good products. There's a few of us out there, and that led to a lot of explosive usage growth. Depends on how ready your product was at whatever scale, whether you were a Byju's or a Vedantu, or or an academy or something smaller, earlier stage than that, like seed state startups like OckyPocky. Everybody saw huge growth.
Mm-hmm.
um, what that led to was that a lot of these early adopters faced two major challenges. um, One is the challenge not faced by them necessarily, but they started demanding more because they started comparing. They were not getting exposed to just one brand because it was top of the mind that my child is not going to school, and therefore how do I make sure that their education doesn't slow down, right?
Right.
So they ended up trying out a lot of products, which puts a lot of pressure because each company is just slightly different in their philosophy, and the user is the king; they can demand it all. But that was great. Now, in wave two, what has changed is a lot of people who were late adopters, which is always a very big segment if you go to classic marketing theory. And these guys, they started building a capability, whether having extra device at home, uh, upgrading their home to a fiber line, or whatever else was available, taking a 4G SIM for the first time because they wanted their child not to suffer. And in some cases, depends on the income strata you deal with. Sometimes you're getting into shared devices. um, in a lot of households that we see, especially because we deal with vernacular children, we saw that moms were using typically hand-me-down phones. That
Mm.
changed. Those phones got upgraded.
Mhm.
Some places we saw a tablet come in and things like that. But India
Mhm.
is not uh, uh, India is not your classic tablet market. It's
Yeah.
been a smartphone market for a very, very long time. Very relatively much lesser PC penetration and things like that. So we saw some device patterns changed over here. Now, unless you were working on a good cloud backing, you had to shape things. A lot
Right.
of adoption also means you're working across OSs.
Mhm.
So what also happened was there were good problems, like my traffic grew by almost double over 45, 60 days. So just the engagement from current user base plus more new users coming in boards. Our code crashed, right?
Mm.
A good
Mm.
problem to have. I
Yeah.
wanted a day when, I get that kind of engagement, and I got it.
Right.
But then, you got to go back because of these users are hungry. They're crying that your app is not working. And it was quite stressful. So we worked day, night, fixed it out, launched the patch very quickly.
Mhm.
Very, very proud of our engineers who were able to turn this around. And and that's what happened. Now, fast forward from here where we are. So I spoke about how wave one gave us early traction, challenges, and now how wave two brought in a lot more people, but this time more discerning. Now, also what happened was, if you had a half good service, you were able to make money. And a lot of people, especially funded startups, we saw a lot of deal making happen where product was not necessarily very strong, but just the capability to operationalize a half good experience, like I call it, was very good.
Yeah.
Now, as this gold rush recedes, as people become more discerning, as schools begin to open up, only one thing remains. We know that Indian users are very, very tough nuts to crack, so they only pick up the best out. So
Yeah.
if you haven't used those monies to also evolve your product experience to a certain level,
Mhm.
you will suffer as a company who's trying to provide these solutions. And which is why I always encourage founders to build very, very high quality solutions, especially in the early days, at least till the time you've hit like series C or D milestones, or equivalent if you're bootstrapped.
Yeah.
Don't slow down on product innovation, because
Mhm.
that's the only way you will make multiple huge segments, at least your top 5 segments of users, very happy,
Yep.
which will give you a sustainable business.
Mhm.
Another story over here is again about retention. So
Mhm.
I'm a maths grad, so
Mm.
so I talk a lot numbers.
Mm. Mm.
And
Which is good.
for paying users,
Mhm.
the typical benchmark that we find is if anywhere between 30 to 40, 50% users are renewing, you
Mhm.
know after the first quick payment cycle.
Mhm.
Not like you logged somebody in for a year at a time, but let's say something reasonable like a month.
Mhm.
Not single class, but let's say a month.
Mhm.
Then you've got a decent product. You have a shot at making it into glorious. At when we started launching this whole human listed live learning process, and today we've built our own LMS capabilities, things like that. But earlier we started just like everybody else on Zoom meetups and things. But we got a phenomenal 95% plus of renewal rate.
Wow.
That's
Awesome.
almost 2 to 3x of the benchmark. So in some sense, we have a very high swag about this, that we are able to build products that are loved by users.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, that's I love the way you have split the last 12 months into the first wave and second wave, and now hopefully we don't hit the third wave. But No, this has been really great, Amit. Appreciate.
I have one more point over here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So one thing that I did not talk about, which is insanely important for any tech business, is what's your go-to-market strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just challenge thinking of some of the people who are listening to this, maybe taking some ideas and getting inspired for their own products.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so frugality is the name of the game. I mean, there is no excuse to burn a lot of money, whether it's investors or your own consumer revenue,
Yep.
to just acquire. And that's something that I always challenge people to be more creative about your go-to market. I mean, it's not about the fact that I'm using a Google ad or I'm putting out a hoarding or a print or whatever else you're doing. The issue is that, are you doing it really, really well? How are you doing it? What's the quality of your campaigns and things like that? Now,
Yeah.
just to give you an example, we've got a huge advantage because an average free app download in my industry is about 20 to 30 rupees, right? And we do it at
Mm-hmm.
less than 10% of that. Now, for
Right.
every million that I raise, I don't need a $10 million marketing budget,
Right.
is what all I'm saying. So it gives you a
Mm-hmm.
huge, huge leverage in your marketing experiments, in your scaling plans. And that's something that you should chase. And by the way, this has only gone down in the last 12 months. We were earlier at, about 2x of what we are at now.
Got it.
And this is despite the fact so much of funding has flown and ad competition has gone up,
Mm.
right? And so just challenge your limits on go to market. Don't be reckless about just burning the money just because you guys raised around.
Yeah.
And see frugality is your strength also, because it gives you an insane leverage.
Yeah.
Think about building a Google search in the days where practically a lot of their users were coming through word of mouth and PR.
Yeah.
How about that? So till the time you figure that virality out, at the minimum, just keep it very frugal.
Great point. I could not agree more. Especially, this goes hand in hand with retention, right? So once you build a good product and you get users, and those who retain, they are more likely to also spread the word through word of mouth. So, I could not agree more. Good points, Amit. Thanks for that. And we would like to end the podcast by obviously opening it up to you and understanding from you a little more about your hobbies and passions beyond your professional life.
Sure. I think there are 3, 4 things that I've been excited about in general. So some of you know that I'm a travelaholic. Travel is my oxygen. So COVID has been really bad because a lot of travel constraints. But
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys who don't take New Year's resolutions to lose weight. I make New Year resolutions to how many new places I'm going to visit this year. Um,
Awesome.
and the major change due to COVID has been that now I drive around a lot more and fly around a lot less. But I'm
Yeah.
hoping things will go back to normal. I'm a foodie. As a team, we have had a foodie culture at my startup. But in general, big foodie, big on music, and movies in general. I don't consume a lot of print newspapers or TV for at least last uh, 10 to 15 years. So I don't subscribe to any of these. I don't have a TV in my house. I don't have a newspaper.
Huh?
So that's some of the off things. Now the causes that I espouse are, I think, I'll talk summary one and I'll detail out one. So one
Sure.
is, I think, girl child, the cause of education itself. There's a reason why, you know, you build a startup in edtech. It's not only the gold rush, which wasn't there anyways when I started. It was long before
Right.
COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So you do it for impact. Causes around healthcare infrastructure being very weak in India. The old age or senior citizen issues. So these are some of the causes I've supported over the years in many, many ways. I have a
Nice.
very, very active not-for-profit life, which I've lived with startups and outside of startups. Now, the thing that I want to detail out is the fact that due to COVID, India had been making huge strides as an economy, and with every percentage GDP growth, millions of people were moving out of poverty line, from below poverty line and moving upwards. and going to higher order things than just, bread and butter. Unfortunately, the way the economy has been slammed, the experts estimate almost 250 million people in India have fallen back below the poverty line, those who are at the margins. And that's a
Yep.
huge social challenge. I get goosebumps when I think about it. I've gone
Absolutely.
sleepless many nights since this came to me. I mean, I was estimating it to be 100 to 200 million. Then somebody recently told me about Premji Foundation research about
Yeah.
how 250 million people have gone back.
Mm.
And now it's very scary to me on what that means to us as a society. But also as founders and some of you who are listening to this, every scare is also an opportunity to build something breathtaking.
Mm.
So I'm trying to figure out how we can contribute in a constructive way to help things get better. So
Nice.
sorry to end on a somber note, but
No, that's
yeah,
fine.
that's
I mean,
also
this
me.
is the reality of life, and I think we keep hearing this, that India will probably have to have another 3 to 6 months at least before things start turning around. So, yes, it is an opportunity for startup founders, but we need to work collectively to help out parts of society which need assistance. So, yeah, thank you, Amit, for that. Very exciting startup, OckyPocky. I truly appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Vineet, for having me here. And if you guys have any more questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter. That will be great.
Yeah, let me also just add before we part that Amit and OckyPocky are in fundraising mode as well. So that's the last minute sales pitch. But yeah, thank you, Amit.
Thanks, Vineet, for that.
Thank you.